Yeah, baby. Yeah.
It's hard to create good satire, and even harder to create one so perfect that it essentially ends the subgenre for years, only to be copied by those same films when they eventually return.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
And while various films have come close and some have even pulled it off, for me, there's only one that truly comes to mind.
Oh, I'm gonna walk hard.
If you're unfamiliar with the film, and box office numbers would suggest you are, it follows the story of fictional musician Dewey Cox as he grapples with his career.
You're never gonna make it! Give it up, Dewey!
His substance abuse.
Okay, but just this once. Come on in.
And his childhood trauma.
The wrong kid died.
And while you might think this just seems like another formulaic biopic simply made to win awards, well, you'd be correct.
Walk Hard was an idea that I had one night to make a fake biopic.
Well, one day Jake said, Judd, let's do a movie that makes fun of all of these biopics like Ray and Walk the Line and Great Balls of Fire and just all the rock movies.
See, there's a fundamental problem with most biopics, in particular those about musical icons, and it begins with their very structure. They attempt to condense down the entire career of a person into a 2-hour film.
Well, you know, when I tell people I play a character who ages from 14 to 72, they look at me like, what? You what? And then I say it's a comedy, and they relieved, and then they think it's really funny. Well, I think I'm doing okay for a 15-year-old with a wife and a baby.
This leads to the majority of them falling into the same basic story beats. They usually start out with a troubled childhood and nobody believing in them.
Do something!
Then they finally make it big, only to turn to drugs and alcohol, causing a downward spiral. But in the end, they face their trauma and make a triumphant return.
It's been a long time, baby.
And because they have to fit this large time frame into a consolidated narrative, they often rely on montages as connective bridges to move from one stage in an artist's life to the next. This leads to a gross oversimplification of events, like characters suddenly coming up with songs in the middle of conversations.
Every little thing gonna be alright. You like that one?
And while the film takes all these tropes and turns the dial up to 11,
Guilty as charged.
Don't you dare write a song right now, Dewey!
what truly sets the film apart from other parodies is that it's so much more than that. They didn't want to simply mock those films, they wanted to match them. That means if you strip away the jokes, it would still hold up as a genuinely high-quality musical, with an expertly crafted soundtrack and filmed in a way that rivals the very films it derides.
Walk hard. Hard.
And beyond even that, they wanted to perfectly match the tone of biopics and the very nature of their creation, because every biopic is essentially going after the same thing.
We made this movie because we wanted to win Academy Awards, and I think that we will.
Biopics at large are what we call Oscar bait. They rely on over-dramatization and often nostalgia to put themselves in the discussion for awards. It's something Walk Hard perfectly mimicked through its acting.
Oh, I was thinking Oscar at every moment of this movie. It was really, that was the subtext of my character, win an Oscar, win an Oscar. Isn't that the subtext of every biopic?
That was my, over-the-top, every Oscar clip that you ever see of anyone nominated for Best Actress is sort of like this wailing cry. It's America! And so that was my take on that.
And even the way the film was marketed and released.
Will come out in December so that we time it perfectly to give us an Oscar. Yeah, that's one of the things we're kind of having fun with is how overly important these biopics are made to feel.
And this is the crux of the entire movie, taking elements that would otherwise be ridiculous,
Dewey, I'm cutting half pretty bad.
and making them feel overly important.
Of course, you didn't mean to cut Nate in half. It's all so obvious.
Is exactly what makes the film so poignant all these years later.
The extremity of it, like people getting cut in half and things of that nature, and people taking it as if it was absolutely real. That's what's so funny.
Come on, one more word!
And to push the film's effectiveness even further, director Jake Kasdan convinced the studio to give the film a higher budget, knowing that if they truly wanted to play everything seriously, it had to look that way too.
What I think is funny about the movie is it looks as good or better than any Oscar-winning biopic.
I wanted the movie to feel like someone had hijacked an actual Oscar movie.
They weren't trying to do something different, they were following a very specific formula, which is perhaps the number one reason the jokes in the film consistently land. Take the rehab scene for instance.
He needs more blankets and he needs less blankets.
I'm afraid you're right.
The joke works because the movie looks and feels like a real biopic.
Mr. Charles.
Hey!
That distinction causes audiences to forget that it's a parody in the first place, and allows them an unaltered look at just how formulaic they all are. And yet, in 2025, it hasn't widely changed the genre for one very specific reason. As far as studios are concerned, the formula that most biopics follow simply works.
Rehab.
A movie like Bohemian Rhapsody might seem like a near carbon copy of every other biopic, but it still brought in nearly $1 billion at the box office, because its success is almost completely reliant on the popularity of the band, and more importantly, the formulaic structure that most biopics follow, and as a result, the beats that audiences already understand. They're predictable, but for the average moviegoer, they're also immensely satisfying. That's why studios keep making them, because they still make money and still win awards.
The Oscar goes to Bohemian Rhapsody, John Ottman.
But this isn't to say it had no impact. Like Blazing Saddles did to westerns, and Austin Powers did to Bond films, Walk Hard did cause a significant gap in biopics over the next 10 years, and many filmmakers openly discussed its impact on their future projects. When creating his film Steve Jobs, screenwriter Aaron Sorkin intentionally set out to not write a biopic, noting how familiar the structure was and wanting to do something else.
You had 3 weeks. The universe was created in a third of that time.
And when creating his film Miles Ahead, Don Cheadle stated that he had no interest in creating a biopic after watching Walk Hard, stating, "It's just terrifying because you're like, that's every trope. That's everything that's ever used in a biopic."
It's been a beautiful ride.
A beautiful ride?
Who knows, perhaps this new wave of biopics can become the norm, and more will set themselves apart from the same old formula. But if the last 4 years are any indication, we're just gonna have to keep comparing films like Bohemian Rhapsody to Walk Hard. Or perhaps Walk Hard is a lot like Bohemian Rhapsody. You know, how come no one ever asks Walk Hard, why are you so much like Bohemian Rhapsody?
You know, how come nobody ever asked Bob Dylan why you sound so much like Dewey Cox?
I'm Luke.
Wrong kid died.
Thanks for watching.
And you never paid for drugs. Not once.
Been saving every penny